First thing is, again, making sure that every key feature is mentioned. So that means that for the first year, I need to mention these percentages. Same thing for the second year, the third year, and the fourth. Preparing for the IELTS test, trying to score a band 9 on a task 1 academic chart, diagram, or other source of information. Take a look at this video where we'll go through a screen share to discuss why we think an essay can score a band 9. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Hello everyone. Here we have another task 1 for the IELTS academic writing test. You can see that this is actually a combined chart one. So sometimes this happens where you may get like a bar graph or a table and a pie chart. So we need to interpret this data and talk about why we think this score would, or why we think this essay would actually score somewhere around a band 9. We'll be grading this, as always, using the model rubric for IELTS. And again, there's two different categories: task achievement, coherence and cohesion, lexical resource or vocabulary, and grammatical range and accuracy, which is grammar. Let's begin by taking a look at task achievement. Again, key things for task achievement: fully satisfies the requirements, clearly developed response. So let's take a look and see what this essay is actually already doing. First thing is, again, making sure that every key feature is mentioned. So that means that for the first year, I need to mention these percentages. Same thing for the second year, the third year, and the fourth. And then for the next chart, the pie chart, I need to make sure all of those numbers are mentioned, as well as the year for the students. So let's make sure all of those things are happening. We can see, based on how this is formatted, we start with an overview. So again, the key with the overview is to identify common trends, or the most important trends that you notice in the information that you're provided. It's not just a summary of the question, it's taking the information and trying to give some relevant information. So for instance here, we can say most of the students were freshmen or juniors, because those were the highest categories. So 768 freshmen, first years, 722 third years or juniors. Also, these 2 years had the most even distributions. So the first years, again, it's almost 50-50. And then in the juniors, notice they're exactly 50-50. Okay, these are different compared to the other years. So these are the highlights that we're using for our overview. There's a million different things you could write for the overview. You just need to highlight something that you think is interesting and that kind of captures what is going on in the charts. Beyond that, we need to make sure all the information is provided. We can see that the paragraphs are organized by year. So we start off with the first years. So we see 51% identified as female. So we had the 51% female, the remaining male. So I mean the 49%. Great. So those are mentioned. Next, we have the sophomores. Second smallest group, 649 students. So we have the 649 mentioned, 9-point difference, 60% of their class. So almost 60%, which means about 40% did not. So everything looks like it's mentioned for the sophomores. Next, the juniors, we mentioned that they had equal distribution. So 50% male to female. And then also 361 were male, 361 were female. So we take that 722 and we split it. So we're mentioning that number. We're not saying 722 though, we're saying 361 were male and 361 were female. Okay, these are strategies that you can use to help push your vocabulary, which again we'll mention later on. Lastly, we talk about the seniors, the fourth year students, only about 42%, which we can see here. So the percent was mentioned, and then 535 given in the pie chart. Great, so it looks like all the data is presented. It looks like it's presented in a logical way. And it looks like we're highlighting everything that we need in the question. Great, so for me, task achievement looks like it's being achieved. Okay, we have all the requirements of the task, and we have a fully developed response. Let's take a look now, coherence and cohesion. So we want to have some paragraphing that's making sense and is organized in a logical way. Again, we mentioned that it's organized in a way that seems pretty clear. So it's going by years and starting off with an overview. So I think in terms of structure, this is fine. You always want to decide how you're going to map out your body paragraphs. And I think this is one way to do it that works well. We just took all those different years and gave each one of them a paragraph. Let's see what's going on in between different sentences. Okay. Those remaining. So for instance, we have those remaining. So we have some referencing going on, talking about students. So 385 were female. Those remaining is talking about the rest of the students. Great. So we have some referencing. Okay. Was also to indicate that we have more information going. Okay. Note that also does not just have to go at the beginning of your sentences. You can also kind of throw it in the middle of your sentences as well. Okay. We have in contrast to show that this is going against what was said earlier. Also the in fact, showing that additional information will be provided about this point. Again, in contrast, showing contrast. This means that showing that we're going to clarify something that we expressed. Only putting a little bit of emphasis on the number that's going to be given. Great. So in terms of this, I think we have some things going on to help link our paragraphs. To link our sentences. When we talk about linking paragraphs, notice we're linking it, for instance, by in contrast. So we're showing that the sophomores are doing things differently than the freshmen. Okay. Same thing with the next one as well. And then lastly, we have a comparison between the seniors and the freshmen. Great. So I think in general, in terms of linking, coherence and cohesion, referencing, I think this is helping out for your coherence and cohesion category. Next, we have lexical resource. Lexical resource, again, is focusing on the vocabulary used. So let's just kind of identify some of the words that we think are helping. One of the things that you'll notice, again, we use terms like freshmen, juniors, seniors, instead of just first year, second year, third year, just to kind of mix up the vocabulary there. Okay. I won't highlight all of them, but again, when you see those words like freshmen, sophomores, juniors, that's what it's referring to. So that's one way we're helping out the vocabulary. So even distribution, showing that there's, again, like a 50-50 or nearly 50-50 percentage between two different categories. So for instance, male and female, which we also refer to as the genders. Great, so that's helping our vocab as well. To edge out, or to beat, or to have more than something else, that's helping. The most lopsided, this is showing that one side has a big difference when compared to the other side. There's a big difference between the two sides. So for instance, there's a lot more males than females in that case. To identify as, or to categorize yourself as something, or to associate yourself with something. It's a good phrase. Masculine, to change our genders into like an adjective form. Again, equal representation. Balance, so the two sides are relatively equal. To resemble, to be similar to. So we're saying that the seniors are most similar to the first year students. Great, so I think these are the things that are helping push the vocabulary score a little bit higher. Some of these words you would not expect to see in, say, a band 6 or even a band 7. Okay, so these are the things that I think are help pushing it to an 8 or 9. I'm also not seeing any spelling mistakes or any words that feel inappropriate to me, so I think this is helping raise the vocabulary score. Lastly, we're paying attention to grammar. A couple things for grammar. Notice that a lot of these sentences are starting with little phrases. So for instance here, based on information provided, regarding first years, in contrast to the sophomores. And so these are just little things you can do to start your sentences. If you're finding that a lot of your sentences are sounding very similar or kind of using the same patterns over and over again, maybe try adding a little phrase like this at the beginning, maybe a little gerund phrase or an adjective phrase, just to mix up the sentences, make them feel a little bit more unique. You don't want your sentences to sound mechanical and repetitive. We also have multiple clauses. So for instance, it is clear that most of the students were freshmen and juniors. Okay, so you have two clauses here. It is clear that, followed by another one. And then we're adding on another whole part to this as well, both of which also had the most even distributions. So here you're adding on a little adjective phrase. Okay, so we have multiple clauses going on here. 51% are female. Also note we have this little phrase here, or roughly 385 students. This is describing the 51%. Again, these little phrases you just don't see very often from students that are writing at like a 5 or a 6 level. This is something that you start seeing maybe at a band 7, and naturally a lot more once you enter into like band 8s and band 9s. So again, adding little adjective phrases, noun phrases can really help your writing feel more natural. I like this next sentence as well. Those remaining were male. Again, something we mentioned earlier, it's using a pronouns like those remaining, meaning the students who were remaining. So we're using some referencing there. And then it's a really short sentence. Those remaining were male. So there's only 4 words here. It's very simple. You have subject, verb, object. When you have an essay that has lots of longer sentences, it's nice for your reader to have some short, simple sentences every now and then. Not every sentence needs to be super complicated or have multiple clauses. It's okay to have a couple sentences that are simple, and I think this works really well. Again, we have another phrase here describing the freshman class. Again, another little prepositional phrase here. It's about 9-point difference describing the ratio. We have some adjective clauses. So for instance here, sophomores who were largely masculine. This is describing sophomores, which is a noun. Okay, so adjective clauses are naturally going to help your score as well. Something you want to include in your writing. Yeah, so overall, these types of clauses and phrases are the types of things that you need to include to help push your score up. To get a higher band. You know, if you're aiming for an 8, if you're aiming for a 9, these are things that you really need to be considering for your grammar. All right, so overall, I think this essay could do pretty well on the IELTS test. I'd expect it to get an 8 or 9. I think there's lots of reasons to think it could get a 9. But yeah, we'll be looking at more task 1s as well later. Thank you so much for your time. We'll see you in our next video.